As far as the bulldozer action is concerned, and it is laying down pan-India guidelines on the use of bulldozer by state governments as punitive measures to demolish house or shops of a person immediately after he or she is named as an accused of an offence. Now, the verdict is being pronounced. In fact, let me take you through the judgment that is currently being pronounced. Justice Gavai, he says, and I quote, "Having a home is a longing that never fades. It is a dream of every family to have a house. An important question whether executive should be permitted to take away shelter as a major infliction of penalty." Justice B.R. Gavai has said, and I quote, "Whether the properties of persons accused of committing crimes or even convicted can be demolished without following the due process of law, we have considered issues of fairness in criminal justice system and that case of accused cannot be prejudged. We have also considered doctrine of separation of powers." And Justice Gavai says, "We have considered the rights guaranteed under the Constitution that provide protection to individuals from arbitrary state action, and rule of law provides framework to make sure individuals know property will not be taken away arbitrarily." In fact, he further goes on to say that we have dealt with separation of powers as well as to how executive and judicial wings work in their respective spheres. And the Supreme Court is all set to pronounce its judgment on petitions seeking directions against bulldozer action by state governments to demolish properties of persons accused of crime. Now, Supreme Court said that there should be a rule of law in the state. That's the latest that we're tracking from the Supreme Court. We have our legal editor, Rhythm, also joining us live on this broadcast. Rhythm, if you could take us through the order that's being pronounced at the Supreme Court on the bulldozer action.
All right, let's tell our viewers first that the order is being pronounced as we are speaking. The Supreme Court's big verdict on bulldozer justice. Viewers, remember the entire court was really looking at what the Supreme Court is going to say. The Supreme Court is pronouncing this judgment, remember viewers, on the petitions that were seeking direction against bulldozers action by the state government to demolish properties of people accused of crime. We at Republic TV have also been covering these cases, whether they've been in Uttar Pradesh, whether there's been bulldozer action anywhere in the country. Justice Gavai's bench that is pronouncing this order has now stated they have said that it is the dream of every home, every family to have a home. They've also said rule of law is the foundation of democratic government. The issue remains in regards fairness in criminal justice system, which mandates the legal process should not prejudge guilt of an accused. They go on to say we've dealt with separation of powers as to how executive and judicial have to work in their respective spheres. Now, the big thing that's coming in from the Supreme Court as I'm speaking is that the Supreme Court is going to pass guidelines. Earlier, also, the Supreme Court had made it very clear, Deepak, that they want pan-India guidelines to be laid down to ensure that there is punitive measures that are there to demolish house or shop of a person the moment they are an accused. So the Supreme Court had said we're going to lay down guidelines. As I'm speaking, we're getting in from the Supreme Court. The Justice Gavai has said adjudicatory functions are entrusted to the judiciary. The executive cannot replace the judiciary in performing its core functions. It's very, very clear that the Supreme Court is going to try and say they cannot go ahead and try and misuse this power that you have with you as the government. And there have to be certain norms that are laid down, which is important. I also want to tell our viewers that the Supreme Court has also stated that we've referred to the doctrine of public accountability. We've concluded if executive demolishes houses of a person arbitrarily because he's an accused, it violates principles of separation of powers. So the big breaking news coming in from the top court, viewers, as we are speaking, guidelines that are going to be laid down. The Supreme Court says if the executive demolishes house of person who's arbitrarily only because he's an accused, it violates the principles of separation of power. This is the big breaking news coming in from the top court of the country that is now clarifying not only do guidelines need to be laid out, but they're also stating that the public trust and public accountability. And therefore, if it demolishes the house of persons they're accused, it violates principles of separation of powers. They've gone on to say public officials law in the hands and act in high-handed manner must be fastened with accountability. State Officials cannot take arbitrary measures when right of an accused is violated by the state on account of arbitrariness. There has to be restitution. It was obvious that this bench had said guidelines are going to be laid down because they were extremely disturbed with the way bulldozer action was being taken, bulldozer justice was being done, and now the top court of the country laying down the law stating that the arbitrariness of the state shall not move forward. That's not, it'll violate. If any officer of the state abuses his power, acts in a totally malified manner, he cannot be spared. Therefore, they're saying action needs to be taken against the executive if they act arbitrarily and they act in a malified manner. The top court of the country laying down the law, viewers, and saying the executive cannot declare a person guilty. If a person, only on the basis of allegations, the person cannot be declared guilty, and it could strike the basic principle of rule of law. Executive will not become a judge and will not decide what needs to further be done in the matter. Viewers, as I'm speaking and giving out these details that are coming in from the top court of the country, we're also waiting for guidelines to be given on the bulldozer justice. We've seen several times in the last year, bulldozer justice has been used in several parts of the country, sometimes rightly, sometimes and the Supreme Court is saying use is not allowed. In fact, the Justice Gavai's bench of the top court that's pronouncing this verdict in court 2 today, as speaking at 10:40 a.m., says excesses at hands of executive and the law. Our constitutional ethos does not permit any abuse of law, and it cannot be tolerated by the court of law. So, viewers, we're hearing what we'd already anticipated in the bulldozer justice case. The Supreme Court had said guidelines will be laid down, and any person who's accused of any offense, his house cannot be, or her house cannot be broken down. As I'm speaking, these details coming in, and I'm sure in a moment from now, we'll be getting the guidelines from the court as to what should really be done when bulldozer justice is being used. Who's joining us on the phone line? Swapnil, this is a big breaking news coming in from the top court. How are you looking at the Supreme Court saying that there has to be certain action that has to be taken? They've also said that there can be no excessive measures by the state government.
Rhythm, the court is very, very clearly laying down the law and calling the whip on this, and this was something which we lawyers knew that this was going to happen, because if you have a bulldozer justice where the state exceeds its own authority and its own parameters, the rule of law itself gets bulldozed. So what is there the need for the courts then if the state only becomes the judge, jury and the executioner? So that is exactly what Justice Gavai and Justice K.R. Viswanathan are saying by laying down this law. And of course the guidelines will be very, very crucial as to what sort of action, within what parameters they can do, if any, if at all, they can do any of these things. So this had become a rampant issue, an issue that riled many people who own their properties legitimately so. Because if this was to happen in cases, say, in remote villages or, say, even in prime towns, then what stops them? What stops the state? If you remember, there was a big hue and cry about Kangana Ranaut's office being, sort of a little damaged by the BMC upon the basis of the fact that there was an illegal extension. Of course, she did not go to the court. I believe she went, but I think she withdrew the matter later on because the portion of it was possibly illegal, so there wasn't any chance. But the bulldozer action, the way, the swiftness with which it was taken at that time, without giving her the opportunity to being heard, is obviously the principles of natural justice being violated here. There is no question of any principle. Here it's just a question of saying that, okay, this is not proper and we're going to bulldoze it. And that is the state arrogates to itself an authority which is absolutely arbitrary and within, not within the bounds of law. So that is what the Supreme Court is trying to say. And it's a little tragic, the Rhythm, that this has come straight up to the Supreme Court and not to that particular state high court. So, this is something which the state high court should have done had it been seized of the matter. The very fact that the people run straight up to the Supreme Court saying that my fundamental rights are violated under Article 32, which itself is a fundamental right. This itself is something which, we lawyers sometimes feel that is a little too much of a burden on the Supreme Court. People should go under Article 226 of the High Court to the State High Court of the Constitution under 226. So that is where then the High Courts are seized of the matter. They only lay down the law and they know the state better than the Supreme Court because they're there within that particular state. So this is just another tangential argument that I'm making to reduce the burden of the Supreme Court, because now that we have a new Chief Justice and he's going to be there for 6 months, I'm sure he's a straight talker and shoots straight. So I believe that a lot of these judgments are going to be there when he rather under his tutelage. Of course, this bench was different of Mr. Gavai and Justices Gavai and Justice Viswanathan. But I believe, Rhythm, that this is something which is a good judgment which was very much required, and the guidelines should not be worded as guidelines. Even if they are, they should be considered, and the court should make it very clear that they are imperative. Because what we lawyers do, we lawyers have this real great tendency, this real ingenuity, which is more of a wicked ingenuity, where we say that these are guidelines, so they are not mandatory, they are only directory. Like the directive principles of state policy is a directory. They are not fundamental rights which are mandatory or imperative or inalienable rights, as what we call it. So this is something which is where the court should make it clear that these are guidelines and these need to be followed. These are mandatory. So don't think them to be something which you can, sort of toy around with, because the state has this habit of doing it. And then, there are lawyers, the top lawyers come into the fray, and then, they go by the brief. And then again, the court is burdened. So my short point, Rhythm, is that arbitrariness on part of the state is nothing but a violation of Article 14, Article 19 and Article 21. Equality, the many freedoms, and the life and liberty. So this is what the Supreme Court is hitting at and saying that these three are sacrosanct, and we're going to ensure that we are going to contain the state and keep these rights sacrosanct and untouched.
I completely agree, Swapnil. Viewers, we also need to remember, however, as the Supreme Court is speaking, this is only against construction and illegal constructions that they are talking about. However, this is the illegality of the house, the construction. But we have to see that when it comes to genuine cases, Swapnil, where the state is using this power to demolish a construction for genuine reasons, that the Supreme Court is stating is correct and it can go on. It's legal. They're not going to interfere in that aspect.
Rhythm, the word genuine, again, is a very catchy word. Now, if the state says in its own wisdom, in its own discretion, says that this is genuine according to me, what I am harping upon for the benefit of the viewers is the procedure. There is a procedure that has to be followed before you raise down any building, albeit illegal. Obviously, we're going to raise down buildings that are illegal or construction which is illegal. You're not going to raise down buildings which are legal. So the point is, my short point is that there has to be a procedure that has to be followed. Sans following the procedure, you are absolutely violating nothing. Then that's the definition of arbitrary when it comes to raising down illegal constructions without following procedure. Because that is the meaning of arbitrary. Arbitrariness means that only. So the point is that is what the state is, that is what the court is trying to emphasize upon, that yes, you may bring down for genuine reasons, but you have to have a certain procedure. You have to give the opportunity to being heard. There has to be a notice that has to be issued, which has been spelled out in several Municipal Corporations Act. Mumbai Municipal Corporation Act has got all these procedures stipulated. So I'm sure the Delhi Municipal Corporation has, UP Municipal Corporation Act. These are all state acts. So they're bound to have certain procedures laid down. And if those procedures are there, they need to be followed. Because you people have yourselves made these things, and if you don't follow it, saying that, the Supreme Court has told us, by the way, you go and, bring down buildings that are illegal because you consider them, and these are our genuine reasons, because they hamper light and air, and, those kind of things, these arguments the state can make. So every single case, Rhythm, you're going to see will go to the Supreme Court in this manner if the direction and the guidelines are, first, mandatory, they should be. Two, they should be very clear-cut, leaving no room for debate, so that the lawyers don't come up with their own ingenuity.
Absolutely. And I also want to bring out some breaking news, Swapnil, and I want you to stay with us. The Supreme Court has also now clarified here that this will not be applying. These directions will not be applicable if there is any unauthorized construction on public land. That means if the government is taking action, Swapnil, on any unauthorized construction on public land, they very much can. And when there is a demolition ordered by the court.
Yes. So see, that's the good part. That if there is an authorized construction on public land, I assume what you're saying is that these are twin requirements. First of all, it has to be an unauthorized construction on public land. Secondly, there has to be court-ordered demolition. So that means you have to go to the court to get. You just can't go ahead and bulldoze it. If my understanding of what you have said is correct. So So that means this is a good thing, that it's going to be court ordered, just as you have a court ordered SIT. You know, that the special investigative team on any case, say for example, any case, any murder case or anything of that sort, so then it's court ordered. That means the court is overseeing and supervising the SIT as to what it needs to do. So, and if there is obviously a flack from the court if they don't follow a certain guideline or a certain norm. So same way, I believe this is a good thing, Rhythm, that if this is how it's coming across, any unauthorized construction on public land should be bulldozed with the permission of the court. That's it. So I'm happy about it.
Yes, and I agree with you, Swapnil. Thank you for being with us. Viewers, we'll also take you through the details that are coming up after a short break. But viewers, as we stated, the Supreme Court clarifies that even as they're laying down guidelines, when it comes to unauthorized constructions on public land, there will be no stay. The demolition can continue. It's legal and something the state can go ahead with.
This very important verdict today regarding the bulldozer action that we have seen happening in several areas, especially in the state of Uttar Pradesh. And now there were several arguments that were made in the previous hearings, and considering all the sides, Supreme Court Justice B.R. Gavai has in fact given out the judgment today, where the Supreme Court has very clearly mentioned one thing, that it believes that if someone's house is demolished just because he's an accused, then it is against the constitution. So there needs to be a complete follow-up of the law before demolition of a person's house. And the Supreme Court has also mentioned when it started giving its judgment that a house is a dream for people and it is the right to shelter, which is the most important factor here that needs to be considered. And only because a person has been considered as an accused, then his house cannot be demolished arbitrarily. The Supreme Court also have come down heavily on the government officials and said that those who are carrying out such processes without a follow-up of proper law, then a strict action will be taken against them as well. Now, the Supreme Court has also gone ahead and said that governments that run bulldozers arbitrarily are guilty of taking the law into their own hands. Building a house is a constitutional right. The Supreme Court has also gone ahead and mentioned several directions that needs to be followed going forward. It has said even after the order is passed, the aggrieved party should be given time to challenge the order, because that is what the law says, that there is a right for a person, guilty or not guilty, accused or not accused. People have the right to go knock the doors of the court, knock the doors of the law to see what happens in the process next. So the time should be given to challenge the order. Secondly, the direction comes that there should be a sufficient time that should be given to vacate the house. The Supreme Court has said just because one person is the accused in the case, and the whole house, if it's demolished, then the family gets affected. So that needs to be considered. There should be time given for the party to vacate the house, and also no demolition should be carried without a show cause notice. Very important point that has been mentioned by the Supreme Court. The court also goes ahead and says that the DM will appoint a nodal officer to deal with the demolition of the structures within a month from today, and each local authority will have to allocate a digital portal within 3 months containing details of the notices. So a show cause notice is something that needs to be given to the party before the demolition is carried out, if at all. The court said that the demolition proceedings should be videographed as well. The demolition report should be displayed on the digital portal. So these are very important points, important directions that has been given by the Supreme Court in this very important case of the bulldozer action that has been carried on several accused and their houses. Many families have been affected. So the Supreme Court coming out and giving out this big order that yes, it is not possible to carry out arbitrary proceedings in this case, and the state government do not have power more than the law, and there should be a follow-up of the law before such demolitions are taken place.
Right, Priyanka. Okay, we also have with us Ajay. Hopefully Ajay will be back with us. Ajay is not with us right now. But I want to go back to Rhythm, because Rhythm can help us understand, what we can expect next. Now, guidelines will be issued, like Riyanta is saying, Rhythm, to DMs, to cops. So what can we expect in those guidelines? This is very important, because the Supreme Court is trying to lay out some guidelines and some rules whenever it comes to bulldozer action. And this is a very critical part of this verdict.
Yes, absolutely. And I would say an excellent understanding of what happened in the Supreme Court by our colleague Priyanka, who spoke at the Supreme Court. I'm also going to try and go across to Ajay. He's with our sister channel, Republic Bharat. But viewers, the big breaking news today at 10:40, the Supreme Court was supposed to give a judgment on bulldozer action that is being taken. The Supreme Court order has come. It's much in the same fashion as the hearing went. The Supreme Court did say that any bulldozer action that needs to be taken needs to be with law that has to be followed. Excesses at the hand of the judiciary will be dealt with the heavy hand of the law. They've also said that the executive cannot become the judge. They've also said that when a particular structure is chosen for demolition all of a sudden and the rest of the properties are not touched, presumption could be that the real motive was not the legal structure but action of penalizing without trial. So what the Supreme Court is trying to say is if a person has been who made an accused in a case, but he's not been convicted in that case, any action on his particular property will be considered to be illegal. And the Supreme Court has therefore given out directions, which Riyanka was telling us, viewers. They've said no demolition will be carried out without a prior show cause notice. I also want to go across to Samajwadi Party leader IP Singh on the phone line. IP Singh, आपको ये सुप्रीम कोर्ट का ऑर्डर कैसे लग रहा है?
Right. I think
I'm just going to go across in a second to him, but I also want to, Riyanka, come back to you. What are the kind of reactions you're picking up, Riyanka, in the Supreme Court? Are you seeing any lawyers from both the sides present there?
That's right. There are reactions going on at this point in time. There are lawyers who have come out and they are, in fact, speaking to the media at this point in time. And we are, of course, also noting at this point that it is indeed an important order that has come out today by the Supreme Court in the demolition of properties, the bulldozer action that has been taken place. We will also try and speak to a few of the lawyers here, but I believe I'm at a distance from them. Rhythm, over to you. I will definitely get a word from the lawyers at this point.
Okay, even as we're going to try and do that, I'm going to see if Ajay continues to be with us, viewers. This is this is a judgment from the Supreme Court, but it's politically going to have ramifications with all the sides speaking up about it and trying to say that this is a victory for one side or the other. But we are going to only be talking about the directions that have been given out by the top court of the country as we are speaking. And these directions are clear. These directions are saying that there will not be a demolition carried out without prior show cause notice. Point number one, that has to be given. Point number two, the notice shall contain the nature of the unauthorized construction, the details of the violation, and the grounds of the demolition. Point number three, the designated authority will give an opportunity of personal hearing to the accused. Point number four, these proceedings will be videographed. Point number five, demolition report will be displayed on a digital portal. And lastly, point number six, extremely important, contempt proceedings even against the officials. So very clear reactions that are coming in, and we're only going to try and get a sense of what's been happening also in Uttar Pradesh from our colleague Ajay, if he's with us, and can give us a sense of what's happening there right now. Ajay? All right, viewers, we're also joined by Anurag Bhadoria on the phone line. Mr. Bhadoria, how are you looking at this judgment from the Supreme Court that has said that there has to be a notice given before any illegal demolition takes place? Anurag Bhadoria, spokesperson of the Samajwadi Party, joining us on the phone line. Mr. Bhadoria, how do you look at this reaction coming in from this order coming in from the Supreme Court? What's your reaction to it? Okay, possibly hear me, viewers. We'll go back to him. I'm also going to try and see if we have Ajay and Riyanka joining us and continuing to be with us. But this is the big breaking news that we're putting out today. Right now, the Supreme Court has given directions on demolitions and how they have to be ensured that the government does not take action on any accused. It has to be a convicted accused, and there has to be a certain procedure in law that has to be followed.
All right, Rhythm, we are waiting for our colleagues to join in. You're right. Like we'll go to Riyanka and we also go to Ajay Dubey, who will be joining us live from Lucknow. It's very important, like you said, a very important verdict on Bulldozer action, where very clearly Supreme Court has come down hard and said that the executive cannot act like a judge by directing the demolition of the property of an accused. We have Riyanka joining us. I'll just go to Riyanka Rhythm and then you can maybe take over from there. Riyanka, we are trying to get some reactions from the ground as well because you're outside the Supreme Court. Please take our viewers through what is happening outside.
Get you the details that we are gathering. Well, when it comes to the Supreme Court's big decision and big verdict at this point, well, the focus was the show cause notice that needs to be given to the party in advance before the demolition is taken place. Also hitting out at the state government officials.
Riyanka, hold on for a second.
The Supreme Court has.
Hold on for a second, Riyanka. I'm coming back to you in a short while from now. We have Anurag Bhadoria, Samajwadi Party spokesperson, joining us on the phone line. So I would like to take a reaction from the Samajwadi Party first. Mr. Bhadoria, your first reaction to what the Supreme Court has said on Bulldozer action. What do you think about this? All right. Okay, we will connect back. We're getting some technical issues connecting, but we are trying to get our viewers all the top reactions because this Supreme Court verdict is very important. The Supreme Court is saying the executive cannot act like a judge. So that is a very important part that, of this verdict, where they have laid down the strict code for bulldozer demolition and said that in violation of the officers concerned will be responsible for restitution of property at personal cost in addition to the damages. And if I have Riyanka, I'll go back to Riyanka. Let's go to Riyanka again. Riyanka, yes, go ahead and take our viewers through what is happening because obviously after such a big verdict, we see a lot of action outside the Supreme Court with a lot of lawyers and advocates speaking there. Go ahead, Riyanka, what is happening?
We'll try and go ahead and speak, look for the lawyers who are currently speaking at this point in time, requesting my Vijay to come along with me. We'll just go ahead and speak to the lawyers here who have in fact come out and, they are giving out their reactions in this case. There are several reactions going on. We'll try and get a word from the lawyers.
ये इंक्रोचमेंट है उस डिसीजन प्रोसेस में इस बात का ध्यान रखा जाएगा कि क्या ये कंपाउंड होकर बगैर तोड़े हुए काम चल सकता है या पार्शियल हैज़ टू बी अंडरटेकन विच विल इंक्लूड गिविंग नोटिस अलाउइंग देम टू फाइल एन अपील एटसेट्रा एंड इफ दिस प्रोसीजर इज वायलेटेड देन when it is found that the procedure was violated, then the officer concerned will also be held personally accountable. When it has to be somebody claims damages or restitutions, then probably the officers will have to be personally accountable. So that's the judgment.
Also said something about 15 days notice period and some nodal officer has to be appointed by
15 दिन का वक्त दिया जाएगा ताकि वो उस पर अप्रोप्रिएट लीगल रेमेडी जो हो सकती है वो ले या फिर वो अगर चाहें कि हमें इसको अपील नहीं करना है तो घर में जो बिलोंगिंग्स हैं उनको वो खाली कर सकें वहाँ से। तो ये फैसला है और अगर ये प्रोसीजर वायलेटेड माना गया या कहीं दिख गया या साबित हो गया कि ये प्रोसीजर वायलेट हुआ था, उस सिचुएशन में जो ऑफिसर कंसर्न होंगे उनकी अकाउंटेबिलिटी तय की जाएगी, पर्सनल अकाउंटेबिलिटी तय की जाएगी।
जिन मकानों को तोड़ दिया गया, जाहिर सी बात है सुप्रीम कोर्ट का आदेश ने उन कार्रवाइयों को अवैध माना है, अब उनको क्या कोई मुआवजा मिल पाएगा, वो अपना घर वापस बसा सकेंगे? बहुत
सारे मामलात इस सिलसिले में अलग अलग कोर्ट्स में पेंडिंग हैं और मुझे लगता है कि इस फैसले से उनको स्ट्रेंथ मिलेगा और उसको मुआवजा मिलेगा।
थैंक यू सर।